I want to thank Congressman Vindman for his leadership in making sure that Jamal Khashoggi is not forgotten, and that we will stand always with Mrs. Khashoggi in the search for truth and justice about what happened. And Mrs. Khashoggi, I want to thank you for your zealous conviction to make sure that the truth comes to light. This has been a week of absolute disgrace and shame in the nation's capital as Donald Trump honored and embraced his business partner, the homicidal crown prince of Saudi Arabia, Mohammed bin Salman. And we have seen, even in this degraded administration, a week of absolute moral and ethical collapse when an American reporter posed the question about what would be done with respect to the vicious assassination of Jamal Khashoggi. Donald Trump reprimanded her for her insubordination as if she were a member of the U.S. Armed Forces, and then proceeded to say, as Mrs. Khashoggi said, that her late husband was controversial. There were people who didn't like him. And then with respect to the assassination, he said shamefully and scandalously, things happen. Things happen. Let that sink in for a second. Everyone knows the truth. Following up on Mrs. Khashoggi's point, it can't be said enough. Jamal Khashoggi was an American journalist, and he wrote for the Washington Post. He was a critic of the brutal human rights violations and repression taking place in Saudi Arabia. And when he was traveling in Istanbul, Turkey, he was abducted by 17 members of Mohammed bin Salman's security team. He was strangled, and then he was drawn and quartered, dismembered, assassinated by Saudi Arabia. And this is what our president describes in the compressed formulation of things happen. And that pretty much captures his attitude towards the whole thing. In fact, earlier he had said to a traveling member of his administration who was on his way to Saudi Arabia that he should remind Mohammed bin Salman that we saved his posterior, although that wasn't the word used by our profane and vulgar president. So understand what's going on here. Saudi Arabia was the very first place where Donald Trump traveled during his first term in office. It was the first, I believe, or perhaps second place he traveled in his second term in office. His family is deeply ensconced as a business partner with Mohammed bin Salman. And you remember Mohammed bin Salman's sovereign fund board recommended against going into business with Jared Kushner, the presidential son-in-law, because he had no experience and wasn't qualified. They unanimously recommended against it. They were overruled by Mohammed bin Salman after the first term, precisely because he knew that Donald Trump had saved his posterior when it came to the assassination of Mr. Khashoggi. And Jared Kushner waltzed off with more than $2 billion in money from the royal family, plundered from the people of Saudi Arabia. We need to just remember this, that Saudi Arabia is an authoritarian tyranny. There is no freedom of speech there for political opponents of the regime. There's no freedom of press there. There is no freedom of political competition there. There is no due process there. And there are people in jail for years and decades because of a tweet they sent. Think about that for a second. They sent a tweet that offended the royal crown prince, and they have been taken away from their families and thrown into prison in Saudi Arabia for decades. And let's just say that Mohammed bin Salman is having a lot more effect on our government and our society than our government and society are having on him. That is, we are being drawn in the direction of authoritarian monarchy and tyranny right now. We just got back from debating an absurd resolution on the horrors of socialism, clearly meant to embarrass the new mayor of New York, who's in town, meeting with President Trump. And so while we were discussing the horrors of democratic socialism, this very week, the horrors of theocratic authoritarianism were completely ignored and endorsed by Donald Trump and this administration and by our Republican colleagues in Congress.
So with that, we can take some questions.